So I'm Alexis Costello. I'm an energetic kinesiologist. This is
And
Lisa Kilgour. Yep.
I'm Lisa Kilgour. I'm a registered holistic nutritionist.
And we've been friends for a long time. We like to talk a little bit about the way that energetic kinesiology and muscle testing and holistic nutrition work together to help you feel your best. And I had really wanted to have a conversation today because I've been thinking about something that maybe isn't news to anyone, but basically, I've been thinking a lot in the last little while about the idea of happiness and that like being happy is one of the most sort of revolutionary and rebellious and amazing things we can do right now. And when I say that, I don't mean being happy in like a la 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 la, I don't see what's going on, so nothing's bothering me kind of way. I mean in a I'm here, I'm present, I'm grounded in the world, and I have an internal happiness and comfort that is allowing me to navigate the world in a really specific and intentional way. And so this has become a big focus for me in my own work and my work with clients, but my self work as well in the last little while. And I know that for me, nutrition is a huge part of that as well. So I thought it would be lots of fun for us to have a chance to kind of talk about this together.
I love this topic. And even just how we look at food can change how we feel about it. And like food can be a place of like joy and happiness, or food can be a place of stress and worry and self doubt. And so we can just by shifting even how we look at food can make a huge difference in this.
Absolutely. And I mean, as someone who dealt with a lot of mental health challenges when I was younger, I know that both kinesiology, muscle testing work, and nutrition were a huge part in me getting myself into a more balanced state. And today I was thinking not just about how food, like, I don't mean that we should be looking at nutrition right now as a way of dealing with anxiety or depression, but I'm looking at it more in the positive, like, how do we create diet and lifestyle for ourselves in a way that promotes happiness and stability?
Yeah. How I see it is food puts the floor under your feet so you can stand up and deal with life. And when food isn't working for you, it can increase anxiety and depression for some people. But more than anything, it steals joy, it steals energy, it makes life harder simply because your body doesn't have the basic fuel. You wouldn't expect a car to drive without gas in it, but we expect our bodies to function fasting for long periods of time or just forgetting to eat all day and then wondering at 4 why I'm so tired and anxious and not feeling well. It's like, well, just feeding ourselves enough every day. It's like it's such a simple thing and it's so not cool, but it makes a huge difference.
I I saw it. Now I'm going to preface this with I did not vet this at all. I haven't looked it up to see if it was real, but I saw a thing on, the socials that was basically talking about how they did a study where they gave couples each a voodoo doll that was supposed to represent the other person in the relationship, and they were measuring their blood sugar levels over the course of like 3 weeks or something like that while they were supposed to take this doll. And the idea was that every time they were super aggravated or annoyed with their partner, they were going to put a pin in the doll. And they measured, you can see where this is going.
Yeah.
They measured what people's blood sugar levels were at when they were feeling annoyed enough that they were like stabbing a voodoo doll. And lo and behold, when our blood sugar crashes, we are irritable and grumpy with the people in our lives. And so the conclusion that they were drawing from this is really that what we eat can, on a very real physical and chemical level, affect our relationships, right? And we know that that's huge for our quality of life.
Well, I may have on several occasions made a snack for myself that was extra delicious for a partner of mine while we were in an argument because I realized the argument was stemming from low blood sugar. And in that moment, it's really hard to say, love, I think you're hungry. Could you please eat something? Instead, I would simply make something that I could offer. Hey, would you like some? and magically the argument is over. And it's like, and even just the self-awareness of realizing, oh, I'm not thinking in the same way I normally do. Maybe I'm hungry, maybe I need something to eat, because hunger isn't, for a lot of us, the traditional thing that we think of hunger, of like that empty feeling in our stomach. Blood sugar hunger is emotional, and sometimes it can make you shake. There are definitely physical issues, but often it is entirely mood based. And when you start to get to know that, like I used to have massive blood sugar fluctuations. Me and my boyfriend in my early 20s would argue every single time we walked into a grocery store, because we would always walk in hungry and then have a massive fight. And it's amazing how simply balancing your eating can make the world seem a little easier to function in.
Mhm. Yeah, I laugh now because Hannah's boyfriend will be like, have you fed your Costello in the last couple hours, right? It's just like, is your Costello tired and grumpy? Have you fed them in the last couple hours? Maybe make them a snack. Um, it's very cute and it's very, very true.
Mhm.
Um, I'm curious because I know some people, I mean, this is a joke because like I know that myself, my kids, we do tend to get kind of hangry if the blood sugar doesn't stay pretty steady. Do you think it's true of everybody, or are some people just a little more sensitive to that than other people?
I think some people's bodies work differently. So some people have massive crashes, and for some people, for others, cortisol will kick in and knock it up. So they're, instead of having that big crash, they have a big cortisol spike, and that can completely remove hunger. It can also trigger anxiety, but it can trigger an energy rush. This like feeling. So I'll hear from people who are like that. I don't want to eat all day because I have better energy when I don't. And it's because you're on a cortisol high the whole time. Often they will crash later. But yeah, I do think that some people are really sensitive. People who constitutionally have really low blood pressure will crash really fast. They don't get the spike because they don't have the cortisol to spike. And then people with like more normal to high blood pressure will have more cortisol available to give that spike instead.
That explains it too. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, last time we did one of these kind of conversations, we were talking a lot about cortisol in like perimenopause and menopause. And I imagine that for those people where their cortisol tends to kick in and make them feel okay when the blood sugar is wobbly, that then when they hit perimenopause and cortisol becomes a bigger issue, it probably just all kind of falls apart, right?
Well, what happened, because the hormone shifts raise cortisol on its own, now we have this double whammy. And so what I'll hear from a lot of people, both men and women, is this all worked until I turned 40, and now I'm gaining weight, or now I can't sleep at night. And it's just that wasn't working before, but your body could handle it. And now with this added stressor of a hormone shift, or simply just the mechanisms are breaking down. Micronutrient deficiencies are popping up, like magnesium or B12 or folate, and that can cause it to be that your body just isn't happy in this really stressed out state that worked with massive quotation marks before, because it didn't really work. Your body just tolerated it better. So yes, and the cortisol cycle can break down, and you don't no longer have that cortisol, and so now you're exhausted and your energy's at a 1 instead of hitting that 9 out of 10 every day, and you're almost bedridden. And that was just like you burned out your cortisol. Where people with low blood sugar, your cortisol's already almost burnt out all the time. You're sitting low, and so your body never tolerates what these others could tolerate before. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if we kind of take a look then back to this idea of like being our best self. Um, I feel like a lot of what we do in the energetic kinesiology world is, I mean, we're always looking for stress, right? So where's the stress on your body that has allowed a specific condition to exist or something of that sort? And when we look at removing some of the stresses, removing some of the traumas, removing the coping mechanisms and all of those things, I think what happens is it allows us to come closer and closer back into alignment with our original template, like our blueprint for our best self, right? Who I'm supposed to be in this world. And, the stresses and things kind of pull us further away from that. And then when we can remove those stresses, we come back in. But the way that my work defines stress, something like a micronutrient imbalance, like you're talking about, is a stress, right? If my body doesn't have the B vitamins it needs to be able to manufacture those adrenal hormones properly, that's a stress. And that's something that pulls me out of that alignment that I want to be in. So I think a lot of it comes down to being able to identify also when the stresses that are pulling us out of alignment are nutritional. Can we
Mhm.
see that? And then how do we bring that back into a much more balanced kind of state?
Yeah, I talk to a lot of people about the stresses we have control over. So there are outside stresses that we don't necessarily have control over: work stress, family stress, life. But then there are the things that stress our body out that we have full control over. Are you eating regularly through the day? Are you drinking water regularly through the day? Are you allowing for sleep at night? And as simple as those three sound, and again, out of fashion those three sound, because fasting is so popular right now, they make a massive difference in how, because when we can control those stresses that often get put aside, the basic self-care of, this is my human body that I have been tasked to take care of in this life. We often put it aside to take care of other human bodies. When we put ourselves on the priority list, then all of the other parts of life and all the other stresses are easier, because our body isn't in this already drained state. And I work primarily with women over 40. And so I see this often, of this relearning the basic art of taking care of this body. Because when your kids are young, there's a lot that they need, and their survival is based on it. But then as they get older, it's like, okay, now we got to learn how to take care of your human body again, because it's asking for it.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
part of what you're saying is what I mean when I talk about the idea of happiness as being like
Yeah.
almost a rebellious thing. And I know that maybe sounds funny to say it that way, but I feel like as women, okay, and I understand that people don't like it when I start sentences with as women, but here we are. Um, like as women, we are conditioned that taking care of our own happiness is secondary, right? It's not supposed to be the priority. And if you are taking care of yourself well, if you are making your health a priority, that sometimes looks like being selfish or being petty or something of that sort. And then that's just taking care of yourself that I'm talking about. God forbid you actually say something like, "Oh, I'm happy actually with the way I look," or
I
"I'm
know.
happy in my relationships." Everyone around you is just like, "How dare you?" You know? Like we're not supposed to be. And so it
No.
feels like a thing that we kind of need to reclaim a little bit at this point.
Yeah. My favorite thing that's happening right now is women reclaiming the happiness of being alone, because research has found the happiest of all of the groups are single women living alone, then married men, then married women, and then single men. And so we have been programmed at growing up that our true happiness comes in a relationship, when actually our happiness falls, not in a traditional relationship, not in everyone. But men's happiness increases because we give so much in that relationship. And I just love that paradigm is being questioned now. And and it's not that I'm in a great relationship. I love my husband, and I loved being alone. And I married him because being with him made me as happy as being alone. And as women, we are conditioned in this other way. And like the shame my family had for me being single, like I felt it from them. They were very happy when I met someone. And it's like, my inner happiness comes from me and not from a relationship. And it's my job to take care of me. And that is so rebellious that I love it.
Now, my husband makes me breakfast every morning, almost every morning, which I think is one of the major reasons why I'm married. So
It's
look,
glorious.
we have taking care of the blood sugar
Yeah.
and we have the relationship dynamic. It's all very good. But yeah, so that idea of being happy in that. And actually, what just popped into my mind when you were saying that was I see all of the on social media, you see all of the like girl dinner
Mhm.
things
Yeah.
now, which it sometimes is great, and sometimes it's like, well, that's just making up a cute title for the fact that you're eating nothing but crackers. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Um, and so again, that idea of like, is it okay to be by yourself and just provide good food, good nourishment for just you?
Mhm.
Or
Mhm.
I don't know what your take is on that.
Yeah, I find it interesting. I take it from two perspectives. One is a rebellion of I need to do everything perfectly, and that it's okay if I throw together a dinner that makes me happy. And on the other side of it is is this the exact opposite side of are you not taking care of yourself and trying to be rebellious in it? Is it coming from this place of lack and I think there's a balance that we can find in there, that there's can be a gloriousness of just like, I am not putting the work that I always put into dinner. I'm going to enjoy it myself. And it's like food doesn't have to be perfect. But I also think that putting ourselves on the priority list, making dinners for our family that only we like, because we're the ones making that dinner, is rebellious because it is also so uncommon and hard. I just have one person that I live with, and I still have trouble making the meal that I just love, because it's like, well, but I make meals that he just loves all the time, because I think like that's, yeah, anyways, it's something that I'm working on myself, and I find it I find it as an interesting part of this conversation, bringing joy and happiness with food.
And the thing is that I love food,
Yeah,
right?
I know.
I've got all of
Yeah.
that earth energy stuff going on. It for me to spend time in the kitchen and do things like yesterday, I was having a very stressful day, and I did things like I switched over my kombucha. I made yogurt.
Mm.
I I created some tinctures, and I made like a really delicious like meat sauce that I let simmer for a long time with all the herbs and things like that because I was home and I could do so. And that for me feels really nourishing and grounding to be able
Mm-hmm.
to actually prepare food in that way. And I know also because I haven't always had the luxury of time, like we don't always have that. So that even that
Mm-hmm.
act of preparing food can be so restorative, and it also can be just another task on a day that's already, full up to here. And how do we create those bits of joy out of it and happiness and self-fulfillment, even on a day when we don't feel like it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's
Yeah.
when it starts to become helpful to have some of the pre-made things or not being perfect, like you're saying.
Mm-hmm. I think there's power in having a meal that you can throw together in 15 minutes and love. Like there's a lemon pasta that my husband and I both absolutely love. It takes no time, and it's so good, and just like warms our souls, that it's like when I'm tired or he's tired, we know we can have dinner together. And then there are the times where it feels nourishing to really make something and that spent a lot of time cooking. And those are different things, and they're both fine and healthy and wonderful. What I work with a lot with my clients is bringing fun back into eating, and allowing for things like, this is a meal I'm obsessed with and I'm eating it like every day. I'm like, great, wonderful. And when your body stops wanting it is when it's time to shift. And there's so many ways around eating that it doesn't ever have to look like what Instagram shows or what we see on like they're like those. I have an issue with people who take photos of their meals. I don't care. And because I do food all day, I think I have a larger reaction to it than most people. But it makes it can put pressure on people thinking that every single meal needs to be Instagram beautiful. And it doesn't. It can just taste good and look and not look great and feel good. And your body knows exactly what it needs. And if something feels really good, that's all you have to pay attention to.
I'm laughing because my littlest, so George just turned 12 in December, and he's kind of getting into the idea of cooking. And
Nice.
so I've been taking pictures of food because it's like he wants me to take pictures of his food when he makes something. And yesterday we baked cupcakes because he got a cookbook that he wanted from this YouTuber that he likes. So I bought him the cookbook and he found the recipe. And so he was like learning some skills, like how to separate eggs and how to make icing and things like that that are not
Mhm.
necessarily like basic cooking skills, but like just one little tiny degree above. But it's been super cute to watch him kind of discovering that. And it's fun to be doing that with him again at this point. It's been a while since I did that with a kid. So,
Yeah. And I think that skill set as a kid is a really important one bring fun into food later. Because when we don't have any cooking skills at all, then the kitchen always feels intimidating. It may always feel like I don't know what I'm doing. Or it can just be this fun place to experiment. And there is, I think, when you can do it as a kid with joy, then it becomes less of a burden as you get older.
so if it's okay to kind of shift gears for a second
Mm-hmm.
here. One of the things that I know we both work with a lot is the idea of working with the microbiome and
Mm-hmm.
like the gut-brain axes. I had created a course last year called Guardian Element that was working a lot with the microbiome and the fascia and looking at that like as an element in the body. And one of the concepts that I found really interesting was the concept of psychobiotics and the idea that it's not just about, good digestion, but when we take in certain probiotics in the right quantities and the right ratios, because that's very important. But when we have them in the right ratios, they're actually making neurotransmitters, and how those neurotransmitters are then going to impact our overall mood, right? Because that's what we're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
and emotion and emotional stability. So how do you help people to be bringing in the right amounts or maintaining good amounts of probiotics, psychobiotics in a
Mm-hmm.
microbiome?
Yeah. So my TEDx talk is on this topic exactly. So we can link to it if anybody's interested. So our microbiome, our gut, is home of our second brain. There's as many neurons around our gut than we have more in our gut than our spine, and is the largest concentration outside of our brain. And it uses the same neurotransmitters, but makes a lot of them. So 90% of our serotonin and 50% of our dopamine is made in our gut. And what research has found is that it is actually the probiotics, the microbiome in your gut, that requests these neurotransmitters. And so a healthy microbiome equals a healthy production of these neurotransmitters. In the gut, they help motility, they help move your food through. And there is, we still don't know fully how much it's reflected in our brain, but there's definitely a gut mood connection. For me, what I don't specifically worry about the exact, like my microbiome is different than yours. So I'm looking at what is your unique balance. And we can get there by bringing in seeding with good psychobiotics, but also what's required is feeding them. And what's out of fashion right now is all the foods that feed them. So all the plant-based fibers, which there are some influencers that are saying that all plants are toxic. And there's diets where there's no fiber in it. And my massive concern is what are the long-term effects on your microbiome when you're not bringing in any prebiotic fiber. But all plant-based fibers are prebiotics, every single one of them. You don't need to buy it. You just need to eat a variety of fiber. And when we then seed our gut with these psychobiotics, then that can make a huge difference in the production of the neurotransmitters. It can balance out, it takes the edge off mental health issues. It doesn't solve anything, but can definitely make a big difference. But it's like this really powerful tool that you can do every day with just the foods that you choose. I am incredibly interested though in how the microbiome affects the fascia. Can you like dive into that a bit?
Basically, what I'm looking at in the class is the idea that when we say microbiome, first of all, like, yeah, we can be talking about just the organisms within the gut. But if we extend that to the fact that there is a microbiome
Yeah,
in your mouth and in your
yeah,
sinusoids and in your bladder, and then, like, you know this,
yeah, yeah.
um, And we look at that, they all communicate, right? And they have ways of signaling. Not only are they signaling to each other, but they're also signaling to the mitochondria, which is also a bacterial origin in your body, and they're signaling to your immune system. So rather than thinking of this as something that is isolated in the gut, we're thinking of it as a far-flung organ system. And the other body-wide organ system that we have is the fascia, right?
Mm.
And so I was looking at them as being complementary, like how in TCM, we're working with complementary organ pairings that together form an element. It makes sense in my own head that the microbiome and the fascia form a pairing, and they do affect each other. And partly the reason why they affect each other is kind of what you were saying about how the enteric nervous system is sending so much information to the brain. It is a second brain. But we also have this whole like the process of interoception and all of those polymodal free nerve endings that are in the fascia. And this is where all of our information about how am I, like this is all coming from fascial nerve tissue. And so we're used to thinking of the skin as being the largest sensory organ. But actually, if we look deeper, the fascia is the largest sensory organ, and it is, and you could include skin as fascial tissue as well, right? And so there's all of these different kind of layers of it. They're all sending different kinds of information. So there's sort of this idea that both the fascia and the microbiome are having a huge controlling influence over our cerebral brain
Mhm.
because of all of the afferent nerve flow that's coming from those areas. And it's affecting our decision making, and it's affecting things like our tension throughout our body and the way the muscles are contracting and the way we interact with the environment. So just this huge amount of information that is being made available about how we are at this moment in time. And there's more specific ways that they're connected, mostly through inflammatory markers and the immune system, but that starts to get a little maybe more complicated than we want to get into at this moment. But yeah, I've really been interested in how they kind of reflect each other. And when we look at the internal chemistry of all of our organs and the external state of all of our organs, we again see the way that this pair kind of influence.
That's so interesting. And it really brings to mind like how much our microbiome affects our immune system. Our like autoimmune conditions, inflammation are connected as well. And like all of these things are connected. And when we look at the body as like all of these individual parts that are not connected, like in the allopathic version of medicine, it feels overwhelming because somebody can come to me with 5 different diagnoses. But when we look at the body as a whole and we see how they're all connected, we can find these root issues. And when the microbiome is a root cause of so many different issues, this is something we can control every single day. It is literally fed on the food that we eat. And we can make a measurable difference inside 7 days. Like this is not something that's hard to fix, but it requires simply having fun and enjoying food and a variety of food. And then that, like, I think this is fascinating how it connects with the fascia as well. And like how much bigger than the connection of the microbiome is to the rest of our body simply through this connection of the fascia. That's amazing.
Yeah. And a lot of the research that I've been kind of playing with in the last few years is also talking about the way that the fascia directs and controls and creates electrical signals in the body. So when we talk about meridian flow being very related to fascia, because especially with the collagen fibers within fascia have piezoelectric effects, right? That's why massage works. So it's interesting because if we bring it all down to this very like energetic framework, which is where I tend to come from in this word, things like the microbiome and the fascia have an effect on this electrical flow in the body and how our meridian system works, which is everything, right?
Yeah. And our body has like so much intelligence. And so the way that I work from a nutrition side is through the principle of undieting, which is your body already knows what it needs. We just have to learn how to listen to it. And that makes what you're just saying even more powerful of like, our brain isn't this control center. It's an interpretation center. all of the information is like, there's more information coming from your gut to your brain than your brain to your gut. And when we think of the flow going up instead of down, then we can start saying, oh, why do I just like have this overwhelming urge to eat cheese? Well, maybe because your body needs it. I'm saying this because I've had massive cheese cravings lately. I have a dairy sensitivity. I haven't reacted to any of the dairy I've been eating for the last week because I'm simply following my craving. And I've noticed over the years that when like I either have no interest in it or it feels like the greatest food ever. And when it feels like the greatest food ever, I have zero reaction. And and this is not a deadly allergy, so I can play with it. It's not anaphylactic shock allergy. I should put that caveat. But when like I find it really powerful when my clients just get to the place of, I don't know why I want this, but I do. I'm like, great. And that food isn't a big deal. I always want healthy food. If I want a cookie, then maybe it's because I need a cookie. I'm like, exactly. You might need joy. Like you just might need something pleasurable. And this like incredibly, like we're walking around in this incredibly intelligent system that this brain can never understand. But if we allow the body to guide us to what we need, it will find balance in a glorious way. Like, oh, I love this.
Yeah. Okay, but then to play devil's advocate for a second, how do we then tell the difference between an addiction, like I want a cheeseburger and fries and a Coke, and that's what my body is telling me I want right now, right?
Yeah.
It's not because I'm needing one of the nutrients. This isn't, oh, I need magnesium, so I'm craving dark chocolate. This is an addiction pattern. So how do we tell the difference between one and the other? I know I tell the difference with muscle testing. How do you tell the difference?
So I tell the difference by getting to the core of why. So I have yet to meet somebody who wants some hamburger, fries, and Coke that has eaten enough that day. Every single time it's a request for food. For like, and the body knows a fast way of getting food. I've worked with people who say I have, yeah, exactly. But like, and this is like, there's very rarely can I say 100%, and this is probably 95%. 95% of these big cravings for what we categorize as junk food is when we actually look at the day, they have not eaten nearly enough. And that when we take that into account, those cravings go away. And I've worked with many people who say, I have a sugar addiction. I go to a store every day and at 4 o'clock and I buy a bag of candy. And when like it was one example, she was a training athlete and she had a really stressful job. When we actually increased her calorie count to what was required for her day, she no longer cared about candy. And the day she had candy, when she actually like tallied it, because only with athletes do I ever talk calories, because the calorie need is so high that we have to see how much food that actually is. On those days, the day she craved candy, she would tally it in and she's like, and it would just like, I would be full the moment I hit the calorie amount that I needed. Like, just like it was later, I would add it in. I had other ones who like every day when I go to pick up my kids, I have this overwhelming urge to get a hamburger from a fast food joint. It has to be addiction. I can't stop. When we fed her enough during the day, she stopped needing it. And so that's just one example of getting to the core. So sometimes it is an emotional craving of this was denied from me as a child, and there's a childhood temper tantrum that's happening, and that feels really addictive. But often the physical craving isn't necessarily for a nutrient, it is for volume. And that is so powerful, and because it makes no sense rationally, it feels addictive. And then there is the 5%, I'm just guessing here, that is of that like real serious biochemical addiction. But most of the time with the people that I have worked with, I have always seen it as it's fixable once we feed you, and then the body starts asking for food.
I love it's fixable once we feed you. That's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. And there is this aspect of ultra processed food is made to be addictive, but it also is made to be unsatisfying. And that as soon as we satisfy the body with nutrients and volume, then that the body just naturally says, I don't want this. Like I had a client once who would always say no to Dairy Queen when her family would go, and she felt so deprived of it. I'm just like, go and have the Dairy Queen. it's no big deal. It's just one thing. It's not going to make or break your life. Once a week is not a big deal. She came back. She's like, it's really gross. I'm like, I know. Because when the body is fed, it will see that as what it actually tastes like. But when the body is underfed, it will see it as a simple solution that it can talk you into.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
So then we get the short term, happiness, the short term high of
Yeah.
the blood sugar being high, and we feel fed and we're actually satisfied for a second. So it feels good, but then you get the plummet after.
Yeah.
So it
And
doesn't
then
continue.
micronutrient, the nutrient deficiency that your body's like, okay, I've had food, but I don't have nutrients yet. And then it'll keep you hungry. But it's like a lot of evening eating is almost all of it is due to I haven't eaten enough during the day, but it feels emotional because you're full. You've eaten dinner, you feel full, but your body's like, but you've barely had enough. It fed me enough for a toddler at this point. Like I need some food. And so it will talk you into everything. And again, 95% of the time, when you eat enough during the day, those go away. And the last little bit is the emotional cravings. And then you can feel them as the difference. You can say, I had a really hard day. I'm feeling really sad. My body wants to be comforted by something that comforted me as a child. But when you're hungry or when you're underfed, your body will still do that. It will take this moment of exhaustion and overwhelm and say, I can talk you into food right now. So go and eat that food that comforted you as a kid. And there are different reasons that we can get rid of a good chunk, and then you just have the one that's emotional focus on and understand and learn and bring kindness to.
Actually, I'm gonna go back for a second. You said
Yeah.
something a minute ago that really I snagged on it, and then we kind of kept going. You said that there are influencers that are saying that everything plant-based is toxic,
Yeah. Yeah.
and my brain just went, wait,
Yeah.
what?
I know this is the one that like I'm 20 years into this. I didn't think I could get my mind blown. Yeah, it's in the carnivore space that plants are toxic. Also the lectin space, but they've taken the lectin conversation and moved it into all plants are toxic. I've heard
Right.
it from people who have removed all fibers from their diet because aren't plants toxic.
Right. And I mean, I know that for myself, like you, I'm Michael Pollan kind of fan, right? Like
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
eat food, not too much, mostly plants. That's
Yeah.
what we do,
It's
right?
so
Like
simple.
that's
Yeah. Yeah.
okay. Um, all right.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And what interests me about that is the understanding that, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, because my understanding of nutrition is less than yours. But a lot of the things that we think of as being the superfoods, the antioxidants, the flavonoids, there are the things that
Mm-hmm.
are like a wee tiny bit toxic in the plants,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like they are absolutely there as a plant's defense mechanism. And also in our own bodies, they work as
Mm-hmm.
defense mechanisms. They're anti-inflammatory, they
Mm-hmm.
are stimulating to cell growth, they promote the microbiome health. Like
Yeah.
they're not really a bad thing.
I know. And thankfully, my social media feeds understand that I don't want to hear about how plants are toxic. So I haven't been bombarded with it because they know me better than that. Algorithms are algorithming. But from what my understanding is that they're taking that first aspect of plants are there to protect themselves. And they're missing the part that then it also protects us. And that the natural process of it, like in the whole plant paradox, lectin, the misunderstanding of lectins, if you simply eat these plants in the way that we traditionally eat them, like we cook the ones that are meant to be cooked, we remove the lectins and that we no longer have this anti-nutrient. So yeah, I've been getting in my social media comments people talking about this as well. So it is getting loud, but my understanding is that they're just simply taking it from the plants are there to protect themselves, and that's why all of our health problems are coming from this. Some people are feeling better eating with no fibers, and that's often due to maybe a sensitivity that they weren't aware of, or a massive microbiome imbalance that is being fixed with quotation marks by starving it entirely, but that will lead to other issues in the future, because what we know from animal studies is animals with no microbiome have massive inflammation and multiple autoimmune conditions. So my concern is the future. The temporarily, yes, it can solve some problems by killing off some guys that are causing problems, but where what's going to happen in a year? And I'm not in the space to have that. Like, people aren't asking me for my opinion in that space, so I can't help shift that at this moment. But yeah, it floored me the first time I heard it.
Yeah. Oof. I don't know. And that's part of what makes our kind of work so interesting, I think, is that I have clients right now who are very much on the carnivore train, and I have other ones that are like, I only eat raw and I'm vegan and those sorts of things. And it's like both are really convinced of the ideology and the philosophies that they
Yeah.
are using.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of gaps.
Yeah.
And I'm much more a fan of the more intuitive eating, which I think again is making you happier as a person,
Mm-hmm.
right? That understanding that I am feeding my own chemistry and my
Yeah.
chemistry is unique.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and that what I need today might be different than what I need tomorrow, might be different than what I need next week.
Exactly.
And
Mm-hmm.
again, uh, as women, let's put that back out there. As women, because of the way our hormones cycle, we do have really different like caloric and nutritional needs as we
Yeah.
move through a monthly cycle, right?
Yeah.
And as we move through our reproductive life cycle, like especially because of just how big those swings can be. Like my caloric and nutritional needs when I was pregnant with twins is very different than what it is now when I'm in perimenopause, right?
Yeah.
And just being able to kind of allow for those fluctuations.
Mm-hmm.
And I know when I was pregnant with the twins, and for several years there, when I was vegetarian, I was quite rigid with my ideas of like what was healthy eating.
Mm-hmm.
And that rigidity created problems for me,
Yeah.
right? And it took a while to kind of unlearn some of the boxes I had put myself in, especially as I was a little bit insufferable about some of it sometimes, as a lot of people are when they get on that train, right? So it takes a minute to be able to like back out of that and be like, I know I said that.
Uh-huh.
Hear me out.
Yeah.
This is what I'm
And,
saying now.
and it's a big ego hit. It's hard, like you've done the hard work, because I think what you hit really nails it, which is the rigidity is the problem. And so when our brain is fully in charge of what we're eating and we're rigid in that, we lose these signals of well, maybe my body will find balance. And all we have to do is look at the raw vegan influencers that have had to start eating meat, and I commend them for like actually coming out and saying my body wasn't healthy. I needed to shift. And we need that conversation. We need to be able to have that space of losing the rigidity. Because when I look at healthy ways of humans, there's a variety of ways that traditionally we have eaten, but we've never been carnivore and we've never been vegan. And so what has kept human beings alive and happy and thriving for thousands of years is just on the inside of that. Like the range is just like we have the Maasai people and like the traditionally vegetarian. It's just like just this inside, but the rigidity of the just slightly outside. It's like, well, there's nobody who's been doing it for multi generations for us to say this is a healthy way of being, and I'm not taking that experiment on my body unless my body says do that, and then I'll try it and see what it feels like. But I don't think it's going to, because it likes balance.
All right. So for all of us then that are trying to kind of create this happiness and get back to our best self. I mean, I know that some of the things that I come up with really consistently for people are, getting their microbiome in good shape, um, eating in a way that feels less stressful, getting enough sleep, like all of that stuff that we've kind of talked about before. But also maybe being aware of what it feels like when you go into, I almost hate to use the term like nervous system dysregulation because I feel like it's been hijacked in the last little while, but
Mm-hmm.
that ability to kind of notice like, am I dealing with the things that are in front of me appropriately, or am I dealing with the things that are in front of me in a way that feels out of balance?
Yeah.
Um, and again, goes back to what I was saying at the beginning about happiness as like an internal state of joy, not a denial of what's happening in the world or something like that.
Mhm.
Um, and so again, things that we can do to kind of bring our nervous system into this kind of better regulation. Of course, there are things like, yoga and exercise, and those things are really helpful. The kind of balancing work that I do with clients is really
Mhm.
helpful. And then do you have a couple ideas of like easy nutritional
Mhm.
things that people can do?
Very simply, how does food make you feel? Notice your excitement to eat it beforehand and how it feels in your body afterwards will tell you a huge amount of what that food is. That can feel really hard. So until then, variety matters, ease matters, and it does, and every day doesn't matter. Every day doesn't need to be perfect. Think of a week, think of a month. Like put your arms wider when you're thinking, and if your head is full of food noise, if you're overthinking your food, start tuning in and listening to the smallest little signals of like, I don't know why I really want dark chocolate right now, but let me have some, or I don't know why. Let me just add some broccoli to this. Listen to those quiet little signals. And it seems so silly considering the nutrition landscape right now, but it's so powerful. And that work of the listening to those quiet little signals will change your life if you allow it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like the world right now is trying very hard to kind of keep us off balance and
Yes.
to try to create a scenario where we are constantly in a state of reaction and
Mm-hmm.
keeping us, oh gosh, this sounds terrible, but like keeping us hungry
Yeah.
is a big way of controlling someone, right? And making sure that they cannot think through responses clearly, cannot embrace their own power, are not strong enough cognitively and physically to do anything different than what you
Mm-hmm.
tell them to
Yeah.
do. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, just making
Yeah.
sure that we are taking care of our minds and bodies in such a way that we can process information at the highest level.
Exactly. Naomi Wolf, I believe, said dieting is a political sedative. It keeps us it keeps us quiet and docile. And eating and feeling full is politically radical. And that's so powerful.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, like if I was to believe what I see in the media, it would seem like the only things I'm supposed to be doing right now would be not eating, working out, and a rather elaborate skincare routine. And frankly, I'm not interested in these things at this moment in
It's a
time.
lot of time. Those are hours every day of your like very precious free time that's going to something that's not going to help you.
That's not going to help you, and it's not going to change anything around you, right? Like
Yeah.
those are things that are designed again to keep you busy, keep you
Mm-hmm.
quiet,
Yeah.
um, but they're not productive,
No.
and I'm not going to get any real satisfaction out of that, right?
No. Yeah.
So
But
yeah,
when food stops being a big deal, when the food noise quiets, you gain a life. Like it's absolutely amazing when you stop overthinking all like the amount of bandwidth that goes into figuring out food when you're in a rigidity or your brain controlled way. Like, yeah, it's powerful when you shift from that.
amazing. Okay, well, we should probably wrap this up here. As always, really enjoyed having this kind of conversation and hearing this other perspective on these things. Any last things that you want to toss out here?
If you want to learn more, I have a book on dieting. It's over my shoulder. If you go to undieting.ca, you can learn more of my philosophy. Where can people find you?
And you can find most of my information at gemskinesiologycollege.com. And I teach a lot of different classes about working with muscle testing and with holistic health and all of that delicious microbiome stuff that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, I
So we'll
still
put
want to
all
take
of
that
the,
course.
I'm actually literally teaching this class this weekend.
Oh,
Like
I love
I'm
it.
doing it tomorrow. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. We'll put all the links to everything underneath. And thank you everyone for joining us.